I've been playing on handheld game devices on and off for most of my life. I remember getting a Game Boy Color when I was probably 5 or 6, maybe 7, and then Game Boy Advance, SP, original DS, DS Lite, PSP, DS, PSP a few times, 3DS, Vita, and then the Switch came out, and I feel like the Switch is really, for a long time, the pinnacle of what a handheld could be, especially because it was a hybrid system and it allowed Nintendo to dedicate all of their resources into a single development platform. In my opinion, the Switch is one of the greatest consoles of all time. And when the Steam Deck was announced, it was kind of the most exciting thing I'd seen since the Switch. And I got a day one pre-order. I got it very quickly after they started shipping. And I used the Steam Deck for a few years and really enjoyed it, or at least over a year and enjoyed it. Over time, I was annoyed by some of the limitations, especially the screen, to a degree the battery life, although the battery life is okay. Not compared to maybe my Switch OLED, but definitely better than the Windows handheld I would later try. Eventually, I got a ROG Ally because there were games I wanted to play that could not be played on the deck, although that has changed in some ways, as some games like the Halo Master Chief Collection now allow you to play multiplayer on the deck, as you can see here. And after I got the ROG Ally, I eventually sold my original Steam Deck to my friend who has been greatly enjoying it, but I did feel a little bit of FOMO. I sold it to him right after this device was announced, the Steam Deck OLED. The Steam Deck OLED basically fixes every single problem I had with the original, other than some games not being supported, because to a degree that's out of Valve's control, and if I wanted to, I could install Windows, but after using the ROG Ally as my primary handheld for probably half a year or more, everything that's great about the Steam Deck is basically what I missed. And so, things that are truly great about both the Steam Deck original and the OLED are the operating system, the fact that even though it is essentially playing Steam or PC games, you have true suspend state, which is just not really a thing on Windows. You can try to suspend a game on the Ally and it'll maybe work and it maybe won't, but Windows is just not really equipped for that sort of console-like experience. Whereas on a Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox, or a deck, hitting this power button in the middle of a game will suspend your game, and when you're ready to play again, whether that's a few minutes or a few hours or maybe even a few days, hit the power button again, you're back in your game. And so that alone is one of the greatest differentiators of the deck versus all of its competitors. The other thing is battery life. The ROG Ally's battery life is basically half of the original deck in my experience. A game that you would get 2 hours of on the original Steam Deck, you'd probably get 1 hour out of in playtime on the ROG Ally. The OLED is a 50% battery improvement over the LCD, basically. And so because of that, going from the ROG Ally to the OLED is an additionally gigantic jump in capability as far as battery life goes. But really, the reason I wanted the OLED is in the name. I love OLED screens. My primary TV that I mostly play all of my PC games on, I usually play my PC games with a controller rather than mouse and keyboard at my desk. Because I work at my desk regularly, I like gaming on my TV. My TV is an LG C1 OLED. It's the best screen I've ever had. And while I don't think this is quite at the same level, as it has a lower resolution and a lower refresh rate, it is so close to punching distance to that screen that it kind of feels like having my home theater set up in a portable. And that is the biggest improvement. If you're going to have a handheld, I think the screen needs to be really good. I'm actually really worried about what the next Switch is gonna be like, or the next Nintendo system if they don't call it a Switch, because there's rumors that they're not gonna do an OLED screen. The ROG Ally's LCD screen is pretty good. It's 1080p, it's 120 Hertz, it's VRR, and it's a pretty vibrant and pretty contrasty LCD. But the difference between that and this is still very noticeable, especially because of the size. As you likely know, the Steam Deck has a 16:10 screen dimension or aspect ratio. Because of that, while the ROG Ally has a similar screen size in theory, this is 7.4 inches, I believe. With these dimensions, games that support 16:10 give you a much more immersive experience, in my opinion, than the ROG Ally. Trade-off is this is pretty big. It's a big device, and the ROG Ally is smaller, and I think lighter, but they cut some of the weight off of the original deck. They reduced the fan noise to a degree, along with a myriad of other improvements, such as speeding up the SD card writing when you're downloading games to it. There's just so much about this that It just feels like a really refined product. And I like that they kept essentially the same performance target. It is slightly more performant in many games, but it's not a generational leap. And Valve has been focused on creating a singular target for developers, which is so smart when you compare it to the other handheld manufacturers who are basically upgrading every year the AMD upgrades, although the Ally is actually not upgrading in that way. I think the Ally to some degree is gonna follow this model for a bit because the Ally X is doing some similar stuff to this without an OLED. But even though the Ally X looked cool to me, SteamOS is really what makes this thing as great as it is. It is a full PC, right? You can run desktop mode, you can install games and other launchers and stuff on the desktop mode, you can run emulation, you can do all that. But if you're playing Steam games on this device, it begins to really blur the line between a console and a PC in a way that I think is just fundamentally awesome. It essentially takes the best of all worlds and merges them together, which sounds like, I don't know, like a paid ad or something, but I promise it's not. I've never talked to Valve. I paid for this with my own money out of pocket. I just think it's a really cool product. In my opinion, it's the best handheld gaming device I've ever used. For reference, the specs on my desktop are very powerful. They're not the most powerful anymore, but they're pretty powerful. AMD 5800X processor, RTX 3080 Ti GPU. I now have 64 gigs of RAM, 4 terabytes of NVMe PCIe 4 storage, although only one of those drives is actually in a PCIe 4 slot. But it's still, both of those drives are very fast, very quick, very awesome. And that setup can play most games at 4K 60 to 100, somewhere in that range. Most games do not go below 460, or 4K 60 rather, except for Alan Wake 2, which beats the hell out of that computer, but I think it beats the hell out of most computers that aren't 40 series GPUs. I reference the power of that machine only to say that because of the types of games I like to play and the level of quality I like to play them at, the deck would not be my only gaming device, but it totally could be yours. If you're someone who has a Switch and you want to play a bunch of games that aren't on Switch, or you want to play some of those third-party games that are on Switch at much higher quality, higher frame rates, higher graphical settings, the deck is a pretty good option because docked, you can boost the resolution a little bit. There's a bunch of different options in different games to kind of tweak to your desired settings without being too like Windows finicky settings management. I don't know. It strikes a good balance in my opinion between giving you options if you want them or letting you just go into a standard profile and just set it and forget it if you don't. Most games that are Steam Deck verified or have the green check, those games are gonna be pretty much set it, forget it, hit play and have a good time. Things that are yellow or playable, those games you might have to tweak a bit, but there's a lot of verified games and most of the playable games I've played just fine. I truly think the Steam Deck OLED is probably the best value for your dollar in the gaming market right now. You can make an argument that the Switch OLED might be up there, or actually the Xbox Series S, given that for usually on sale like $250, but at MSRP $300, you can play a huge variety of generations of Xbox games and Game Pass for pretty cheap. But I love the portability of the OLED. I love the vast library that Steam has. I don't use the touchpads, but there are people who swear by them. And I think just having a huge variety of input options and a huge community of people who create custom mappings for games that don't have gamepad support out of the box. There's just so many things about this device, especially the fact that Valve is a privately held company that has a huge incentive to make this platform the best it can be without necessarily making it worse and worse over time to boost shareholder value is something I really love. I'm not saying they're like some perfect company because I don't think any company is a perfect company by any means, but I do think that I like what Valve is doing in this space a lot. I like the way they're moving the market. I think it's really cool that we're seeing so many other handhelds in the PC space now. I hope that Windows kind of gets it together and starts adopting some of the best features of this device into some kind of handheld optimized version of Windows. There's also rumors we might get a portable Xbox, which would be cool. I kind of want to see every manufacturer throw their hat in the portable race, whether it be Sony, Microsoft. I mean, obviously Nintendo's coming out with their next console next year. So I think it's going to be a really exciting space in the handheld space. But to me, for right now, Steam Deck OLED is easily the best handheld I've ever used. There are plenty of handhelds I've never used. I've never used any of the Aya Neo stuff. I've never used the Legion Go, but original deck, ROG Ally, Switch OLED, Steam Deck OLED, as far as this generation's handhelds, or maybe even something like the Backbone with an iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I ended up returning the Backbone because it just didn't really compete with the handhelds for me. It wasn't in the same space and it felt like too much money, but your mileage could vary there. But overall, yeah, I give a huge ringing endorsement to the Steam Deck OLED. Playing games like Dead Cells, which I've been obsessed with again for the last few weeks, playing Halo Master Chief Collection at 90 frames a second, enhanced quality graphics. That's so fun, especially like swap mode. Even though I got totally demolished, as you can see in some of this footage, I still had a really fun time playing the game. And it's fun to play on my lunch break. To just be able to play a match of Halo on my lunch break is crazy. Games like Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, games like Monster Hunter Rise, which has actually been a really awesome experience on here. It's not necessarily a game I'm gonna be able to hit 90 frames a second at all times. And in fact, it's one of those games where you may wanna play with the settings, right? If you stick to 90 frames, you're gonna burn through the battery 2-ish hours. If you cut it to 60, like 2.5. If you cut it 45, it stays actually similar to 60, which is weird. But if you cut it down to 30, you could get 3 hours if you wanted. I tend to prioritize power over efficiency when I play because I'm usually pretty close to a charger and because I'm used to the ROG Ally, which on its best day couldn't hit like some of the performance targets of this thing as far as battery life goes. If you want to, if you're playing a game like Dead Cells and you drop it down to 60 or even at 90, you can get 5 to 6 hours, which is super cool. And there are definitely ways to stretch a lot of battery life out, which is why I think the official target that Valve gives now is like 3 to 12 hours, which sounds frustratingly wide as far as range goes, but I think that just comes down to the variety of possible games you can play, how much power they demand, and how you choose to set your power settings. Because if you want to, you can, in the performance settings, limit your frame rate or do other things, including limiting the TDP, although I don't usually mess with that. I just mess with the frame rate. And because this is a 90 hertz screen, you can drop it to 45, and most games play really nice at 45. It's like half of the refresh rate, and I don't know the exact science on this. You'll want to watch like a Digital Foundry video or a more technically oriented channel about this, but 45 looks really nice on the screen. 60 looks great on the screen. 30 looks fine on the screen. But for most of the games I've been playing, I've just been letting them go as high as they can and enjoying all those smooth frames. Because although I don't think I can really see the difference between 90 and 120, I can definitely see the difference between 60 and 90. As far as what I'd like to see from a future deck, not much. I think Valve is doing the right thing by waiting until there is a huge generational leap in power efficiency and performance. I would be totally fine if they targeted this spec for the next few years even. One, selfishly, because it kind of sucked when I had the original deck and then the OLED came out and I felt like mine was obsolete. It'd be cool if that didn't happen again in a year, but that's fine if it does. I enjoyed it for the time I had it either way. Two, because having a target like this I think is really good for the Steam ecosystem, and I don't think they should move that target until, you know, it's actually necessary, until there's really a lot of performance gains. But for the time being, this is the best handheld device I've used. Pair some Bluetooth headphones with it or just use the speakers, and it's kind of like having your own home cinema gaming system in your hand. It is very large and the OLED is really vibrant. HDR looks great in games that support it, which is cool because there's, to my knowledge, almost no other HDR handheld gaming device outside of, I guess, using your phone with a backbone and streaming like PS5. Yeah, no, this thing is awesome and I super recommend it. I'd say like if you primarily love Nintendo games, specifically modern Nintendo games, then go for the Switch OLED. If you want to play classic Nintendo games, this can play basically every console up to Wii U better than the native consoles in a lot of ways. My understanding is emulating Switch is kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. And I'm not really someone who advocates for not paying for games. So if it's a current generation thing, I'd recommend just getting the Switch OLED and getting that awesome library, buying them on sale if money is a concern, or just getting a few of the games you really want to play, like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. I love the Switch. I think it's awesome, but I still think this, for variety of the library, for capability, for vibrancy of the screen, that 90 hertz refresh rate, and just a multitude of reasons make this the best handheld I've ever used. I would basically not recommend the ROG Ally at all. Compared to this, I might make a separate video about that, but I kind of covered that here. Let me know in the comments below, do you have a deck OLED? Do you have an original deck? Is there a huge missing feature that you want here? Is there a game like Destiny or The Crew 2 or something else that just is not supported? Do you agree with me that all these third-party launchers should go away and just let us install directly into Steam because it's super annoying? Let me know. And I'll get back to music content next week. Thank you so much to everyone who's liked and subscribed. To everyone who's listened to my album, There's Something Better. I hope you have an awesome week ahead. I'll see you soon. Peace.